come once again to discuss things.
Of a comic book. Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Geeky Gentlemen. I'm Zid Part 2, joining me today is...
What's up? I'm that Matt Kid.
And I'm Steve.
And we are continuing our month of Wonder... Why am I doing that? Alfie's not here to give me shit for that, like... month of Wonder Woman. We're continuing our month dedicated to Wonder Woman. And this is the Steve pick, the review topic for Wonder Woman that Steve chose. What'd you choose, Steve? What'd you choose?
I chose Wonder Woman Volume 2 from 2000, numbers 160 and 161 by Brian K. Vaughan, called A Piece of You.
Yep. Okay, so I gotta ask, like, what... I mean, like, I'd never read this before. I did enjoy it, but I guess like this feels like the kind of comic story that I would be like, oh yeah, that was really good, nice 2-issue little story, and I don't think I would ever think about it again. Not like necessarily in a bad way. I just don't think it would ever really like remain in the vast recesses of my mind. So like, what about this like stood out to you as you wanted to talk about it?
So I have two reasons for picking this. One is, this came out in 2000, and at least for me, I love this era of DC. I love the Titans run that was going on at the time. Young Justice was happening at the time with Peter David. I don't like the Batman stuff. This is when Ed Brubaker was on Batman. I didn't like that so much. But this little microcosm of the early 2000s DC universe is just like a fun time capsule. And it's interesting to go back to it because this is the era of DC where they do all the things that I always really like, where like superheroes are just matter-of-factly doing their job in a way where you get absurd things like Green Arrow and Deadshot sitting in a diner just like having conversations in full costume that you just don't do anymore. And it's funny in that times capsule sense of like how many things are different and how many things stay exactly the same. Like even in the year 2000, Donna Troy's origin makes no fucking sense and no one understands it. 20 years ago and it's still confusing.
No. It's perfect though because we get Donna Troy's origin in here, and it really is like the Steven Sejic joke of pick your own adventure, because she's like, then I lived 1,000 lives, and it was, each different from the last, but similar in many ways. Like, oh, so that's how we get all your origins are canon. Thanks, Donna Troy.
Yeah, no kidding. So that's one reason, is I like this era a lot. But the other reason, the more Wonder Woman-y related reason to this, is Wonder Woman's had like a really distinct, constant evolution since the late 2000s onward. She became a secret agent for a little while. That was similar to her old 70s run. We had the innovation of the Murder Princess. We had Brian Azzarello on the New 52 run. We've reinvented and redone Wonder Woman so many times in just the last 20 years that this, to me, feels like the last hurrah of the classic Wonder Woman stuff. Like, from Marston up through the early 2000s is not a perfect line, but it is a line, and everything after this point is very much choppy in different directions.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Certainly since I've been reading Wonder Woman currently, like, I mean, I think I'm the only person on the planet that can say this. When they really made a push for Wonder Woman and Superman with JMS that they gave up instantly on, because JMS wrote 6 issues and then said, oh, but I gotta go focus on the Earth 1 Superman line, a book that came out once every 4 years. So we got like 6 issues of JMS for Wonder Woman and Superman, and then like his plot just got wrapped up by somebody else. I got on Wonder Woman at that point because that was when I was starting to get into comics, and I was like, okay, well, this is obviously a really good jumping on point for her, and this is where I'm going to be. You know, I'm curious about the character. I want to get interested in the character. And then that was not like anything else before or since. And that's probably for the best. But you're right. It's really gone all over the place. Like, and it's not that there's not good in those times. I mean, certainly the Murder Princess has been a problem, but like there's been good here and there. Like Gail Simone obviously has a very popular run that takes place after this. So there's still really high moments throughout her character, but yeah, you're right, it is a very constantly reinventing the character for 20 years, like every 4 or 5 years, just trying like the new hot fresh take until you get to fucking Rucka with Year One / The Lies, in which he says every Wonder Woman origin from the last 20 years has been a fucking lie. And you can tell he's not bitter in the slightest.
And I mean, I think this is why it's interesting, because Reason 1 and Reason 2 kind of coalesce here, where DC in the last 20 years alone, I think, has done more to change and damage and alter its brand than it's done for its entire history.
Yeah.
I don't know if that needs expanding. I feel like that's a pretty clear and uncontroversial statement.
Yeah, no, they're all over the place. I don't know. I like DC's marketing from time to time, but no, you're not wrong. I mean, just the fact that DC has never been able to like just keep the good logos is kind of telling. Because Alfie and I were having a whole ass argument about the fucking new 52 logo, and he's like, "No, it's great because it's like a comic panel folding." No. I'm like, it's literally like it. Mm-mm. You're covering up the D in DC. That's bad branding.
I remember when that logo came out, there were literally like marketing design people talking about how like flat and undynamic that image is, and they had nothing to do with comics. They were just talking about the branding, and that was always hilarious to me.
Oh, all right. I don't know, Steve. So you like things around this story. What did you want to talk about in regards to this story?
I wanted to talk more towards the second reason, just about like this more classic approach to Diana. I think Brian K. Vaughan has legitimately a really good voice for her. Brian K. Vaughan falls into that category of writers for me where he's like Mark Waid and Greg Rucka, and to a certain extent people like Al Ewing, where they're very clearly practiced and know how to write. They've never written anything that has like blown me away on an emotional level, but like they understand almost to mechanical precision how to write a competent story, and it doesn't matter what they write, they just always write a competent story, and that's how he is with everything. So reading his Wonder Woman, I feel like, is a really good sort of like flat baseline, because he doesn't do anything terrible and he doesn't do anything like stellar, top-notch, never seen this before. He writes just a really good base Diana. And I think her characterization in this is interesting because you put it in contrast with the last 20 years or so, how everything has changed, and here how she's just like immediately diplomatic, immediately smart, immediately just kind of casual and friendly, wanting to have lunch with Donna. I like that a lot, and I also just miss the idea of 2-issue non-consequential story arcs where, you know, they just fight a bad guy. That's the last time we did this.
100%.
Yeah, no, that's gold. All right, Matt, what do you think of
this? I liked this a lot. I thought this was really, really fun. Brian K. Vaughan is someone who I mostly know from what I've read of Saga, and I haven't read much of it. But I'm in agreement with Steve. I haven't really read anything from him that I thought was bad, and I certainly think this follows suit. And of course, I really like I like this kind of story because Clayface is obviously not a Wonder Woman villain, but I like that, we're finding that connection, kind of that weird connection between her origin and this existing character in DC, and finding kind of a cool way to bring those two together for a story. I really like that. I like you guys were saying, that it's just a short story where a bad guy does something and we have to stop them. It's very refreshing in that sense. And I like Diana's characterization in this a lot. I like that she doesn't start with going to fighting. She even says she doesn't want to do that. And I even like when she has her little spat with Donna, how quickly she's able to say, you know what, no, I'm sorry, that wasn't cool of me. It's really cool, and so I'm into this. I do kind of agree with Ian, though. I'm not sure this would like stick with me, but I do really enjoy it and would definitely recommend it as like a cute little two-shot to get to know Wonder Woman a little better.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with it. For all I complain about with like, oh god, I just wish more comics would do just simple one and done stories where I could just hand someone an issue or 2 issues and then that's it. And yeah, I do wish that. I legitimately do, but they are harder to talk about. They're harder to get, like there's not much meat to dig into. I think it's an interesting pick in talking around the characterization of Wonder Woman, the bastardization of her character. Like I think that's a very good point. But as far as the story itself goes, yeah, like the Clayface thing of yeah, I can just absorb Wonder Woman because she's made of clay. I'm like, I mean, like, still though, is she like what? That's a weird, trippy thought, but it's comic books, so it just works. And it's
I love the genuine
funny.
like fucking Adam West logic of it too, or like she's clay, so I'll absorb you, and then Robin's like, well, she's clay, but she's a different density clay, so therefore she won't.
Yeah, that's
that
weird.
line where Tim's just like, I'm pretty sure we have the science of this figured out. And I'm just like, oh, do you, Tim? Do you really?
I love that so much.
I just think it's funny how like taking some of Wonder Woman's clay that made her up makes her appear younger. Like that is such a just it's so comic booky, you know? It doesn't really add anything to the story except now Donna Troy can pose as Wonder Woman. But I'm like, I mean, you look similar enough anyway. You're apparently related, I guess. You know, this week you are. So like you could just Donna could just wear some like higher heels or something, you know. It's quite a journey to get there. It's kind of just fun, silly comic book logic.
It's that type of comic book logic that like when it's explained to you, like on like a gut level, you're just like, oh yeah, okay, that makes sense. And then if you think about it for like 2 seconds longer, you're just like, wait, no, what the fuck? That doesn't make any sense. It's like my favorite. I love it.
Fantastic too, where Donna just like makes a makeshift centrifuge with a fucking train car as if that was gonna work.
Well, no, I love that they're like, oh man, he's stolen my powers. I'm only as strong as Donna, and I'm like, fucking Donna's still strong enough to literally spin this around with enough centrifugal force to separate the two of you. I think you're gonna be fine.
Honestly, and I mean, this is part of why I like this story and I like this era, is that everything is just like, it's human and it's nice and it's sincere, but it's also just really fucking wacky. I miss the 90s days when Tim or everyone in the Bat family would call Nightwing Wingster.
Wingster, I lost it at that.
Right? Wingster is so fucking good.
I've read very little from this era of DC. Like I think I just recently read through the Bruce Wayne murderer, Bruce Wayne fugitive arc. Like that's probably the closest to this era of DC that I've read recently. So it's always.
Man, are we gonna have to fucking do like Batman's No Man's Land on Geeky Channel?
I have read No Man's Land, but it's been a long time, and I would totally do that. But in terms of general DC at this time, shut up. DC. It was it's always a fun time capsule for me when someone picks one of these issues, and that Wingster bit really got me.
Mm-hmm. I just thought it was so weird that this like cringy OC character just showed up. You know, like there's a canonical existence of Robins. I don't know why they had to just throw a random OC character in here. They could have just pulled an actual Robin.
And the paycheck from that issue got me through high school. I will say, because this is really my only negative thing, so I feel like I might as well just say it out of the gate now, is I don't like the art. This is this weird period in DC's history, and this doesn't do it exactly, but most books are doing this to the extreme, where everything's like really anime influence, and so a lot of the characters and proportions and stuff and positions just feel kind of weird and awkward. This is not that entirely, but it has that in some areas, specifically the faces, and in certain situations, I legitimately can't tell that Diana is any younger. Like, her and Donna look alike, but not in the way they're intending. They legitimately look alike in every panel.
Yes, they 100% do. And I agree with that. Like, the art in this is really bizarre because when you get to that part where she, like, goes up to Donna and she's like, oh my gosh, we look exactly the same. I'm just like, yo, you look the fucking same as you did before you got clay-faced. Like, I don't understand. And I mean, yeah, it's just this. You're right. It's just like the weird house style that was going on in this time, and I think that works for some of the stuff. Like, I have read some of the like 2000s Batgirl run with Cass Kane, where everything's like super fucking anime looking, and I love how it looks in that because of how dynamic it is with the fights. But in this, the faces that are drawn look so similar. I feel like it kind of makes the whole conceit of the story feel less punchy because they look the same throughout the whole thing.
There's also just like weird expressions on people's faces at times. So like when Superman or Clayface Superman shows up, or when Nightwing is smiling when he first shows up, like it's like for some reason they're trying to do like a subtler, more like anime expression, and they just can't.
I mean, probably because they just can't. Because they don't comprehend the style, because, you know, DC was willing to do anything to pull in the manga crowd except, like, change their business model, you know? So, like, trying to force a change in house style was somehow easier. So, no, I think that's a fair point. I don't know, I kind of just shrugged at it. To be honest, I didn't really feel one way or the other about it.
It's serviceable. It's nothing beyond that, though.
Yeah. The funny thing for me is, like, this is the second Wonder Woman v Clayface story I've read.
Really interesting.
Yeah, Bombshells does a whole arc with Wonder Woman versus Clayface. It's because Bombshells had its initial run, and then it got like relaunched as Bombshells United right around the time Rebirth started up. And it opens with like this whole arc centered, because like the rest of the book had been like, oh, you know, Europe and the war, and then the United opens up with, oh yeah, hey, America is rounding up Japanese citizens or Japanese American citizens and putting them in concentration camps. That's not a good thing, and so Wonder Woman like fights to stop that, and they end up sending Clayface after her, who's like an American soldier and stuff, and he does it's funny because he literally does this. He absorbs her because of his ability to absorb and amass clay and earth. And the story's called American Soil, which I think is very clever name. So like, it's funny because it just made me want to go back and reread that arc because it's a really freaking great arc. But like it's a clever enough idea, and it's kind of funny that I'm pretty sure Margaret Bennett never read this, or maybe she did, and like, oh no, I know how to make this great. But like, it just seems it's kind of funny as one of those instances where two people separated by like decades came up with the exact same idea.
That is really, really funny. I had no idea that anyone else did this, because I thought part of the appeal of this premise is that, well, oh yeah, it makes total fucking sense that Clayface would go after Wonder Woman. Why did no one think of this? But it's like Matt said, it's that comic book logic where it's like it makes perfect sense on the face, and then you think about it for literally 2 seconds.
Yeah.
Yeah, because like it's funny because like even Wonder Woman doesn't think it's gonna work. She's like, no, I was Clay, I'm not anymore. And then Clayface is like, well, I guess you're wrong. So, which you think that would be like more of the existential dread of the situation of like, no, literally, you've just been Clay this whole time. Don't go out in the rain.
It's it to like think about this story in terms of just like any sort of themes or commentary it might have. Like there's a lot of just talk about Wonder Woman's body and how it feels when Clayface absorbs her and stuff. But almost none of that is very detailed, or if you try to read that into the story, it almost makes it worse than it actually is. And I feel like the theme at the end of the day is just sisters should respect each other. The end. It's a after school special, and I kind of love that about it.
Yeah, it really doesn't go too far into kind of the stuff that it could be implying. I think it's like, because I don't think it was thought of.
No, I don't think so either.
You know? Like, I think it was just Clayface just absorbs her because she's made of clay, right? Like, I just try to imagine, like, the editor pitch meeting for this one, you know? So wait, yeah, I guess Wonder Woman is made of clay. But really, Clayface? Yeah, it's gonna be a great story.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but Brian K. Vaughan never actually had like a sustained run on Wonder Woman, I don't think, right? Because at this point in the book, there was kind of just a bunch of fill-ins before we had like another consistent writer. And Brian K. Vaughan, as far as his DC stuff goes, didn't really have a consistent run on like anything, with like maybe the exception of Green Lantern, because he only did a few issues of Batman around the exact same time. He did like an issue of Teen Titans at some point, and he had like a couple of Green Lantern one-shots. But like he was not on this book for any period of time, I don't think, right?
Not according to his Wikipedia page.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. I've not read, like, I've read issues in this run, but I've never read the whole run. So
Gotcha. Okay, I was just curious if he was legitimately just like the fill-in guy during this era.
Maybe. I mean, this would be pretty early on. Who's the name of the guy that did the recent Detective Comics run where like Clayface was a good guy? Was that Brian Hill?
No, that was Tinian.
Oh,
yeah, that was Tinian's run with Tim, Spoiler, Batwoman, and Clayface.
All right, it's. I was just trying to think of like, well, Clayface was recently like kind of featured a little bit more, and I thought Vaughn might have been involved with that. I'm like, maybe Vaughn just really likes Clayface, and he's just tried to, shoehorn Clayface into any story he can manage.
He likes stories about just like weird identity mistakes and issues, because his Batman stories, he's got one Batman story that's like a 2 or 3 issue arc about Matches Malone, and it's entirely about like how much of Bruce Wayne or Batman comes out in Matches Malone, and how Matches Malone has his own sort of like personality and life independently of Batman and Bruce Wayne, which is really weird and interesting. But just like this story, it's more just like a fun cape and cowl conspiracy as opposed to like anything deeper than that. And this Green Lantern, I feel like, asks some similar questions. It's been a long time since I've read Circle of Fire, though, so I don't know.
See, I don't think I've ever read his Green Lantern. Brian K. Vaughan, Green Lantern. Like, I don't know, this guy's name literally does not stick out to me. I just keep thinking of him, and I'm like, is it this guy?
Nope. It's Why the Last Man, Ex Machina, and Runaways. Runaways is really good. It's not my bag, but it's really good. Why the Last Man is also really good and not my bag. And I've never read Ex Machina, but I know it's done with Tony Harris, and I love Tony Harris art. The only other thing I've read by him that stands out is he did a Doctor Strange mini at one point that was really good, and that's about it.
He's got Saga, which is pretty fun, but I mostly read that for Fiona Staples' art. Because her art is But anyways.
Gotcha. It's funny, Circle of Fire, it's a Kyle Rayner book. I'm like, oof, I might have to fuck with that soon. Working my way through Kyle's original run. Yeah. So I'll have to get to it soon. I'm working my way through his stuff. Right now I've got to mentally prepare myself because I need to go find and buy an issue that's written that's issue 1 of 2 written by Chuck Dixon, and I'm like, all right, got to prepare my anus for this one. So yeah, I'm not. I'm taking a break on the Kyle Rayner reread as I've been doing, because I'm pretty sure I've been on that reread for like at least 7 months.
No, that stuff lasts.
Yeah, but otherwise, back to this story. I don't know. Like, this is also a weird time in DC, because speaking of the Kyle Rayner book, Kyle's in New York at this point. The Titans are located in New York. Wonder Woman's located in New York. Like, this is when she was ambassador and, working at the UN and stuff. So it's kind of interesting that, like, Marvel for so long was associated with New York, and DC a number of times has tried to make moves on New York, and it never seems to quite stick.
You should talk about it like they were having a turf war.
I mean, like, it really does, though. Like, because I know just at the beginning of New 52, when they did a Static Shock book, he was in New York, and that shit didn't last.
Weird to put Static in New York of all things, because part of the appeal of that character and that story is that he's a Midwesterner.
Yeah.
Very, very strange.
Yeah, he was in...
What if the New 52 didn't have the character's best interests at heart?
How dare you imply that about the era for which such famous things as I'm drawing a blank.
It had that. I mean, New 52 had the Good Morrison action run.
That's true. It did have Good Morrison action run. If only DC did not scare them off.
Yeah, I'm just saying. But the New York thing is...
It had All-Star Western. That's a good book.
The New York thing is weird to me. Because I always kind of viewed, like, Metropolis and Gotham as almost, like, two vast exaggerations of, like, the best and worst parts of, like, of real New York City, in a sense. I really like, when they're depicted as being fairly close to each other. That's always something I like. And so, I always geographically position them about where New York would be. So if New York also exists in DC continuity, which it does, it's just very rarely brought up in what I've read, always fucking throws me off. Because I'm just like, why are we here? Invent some new cool fictional city. I don't give a fuck about New York.
It's really funny to me, too, because Batman originally appeared and lived in New York, and all of his early stories are in New York City because back in the day, Gotham was a nickname for New York. And then gradually they just turned it into Gotham City. I don't think it's, like, legitimately Gotham City until maybe Batman #1 in 1940. But, like, all of his early detective stories, they're all in New York City. And then they shift him to Gotham City, and for a while, the DC... whatever those big reference encyclopedia things are called, for a while they had Gotham City in New Jersey, which I always thought made a ton of sense because it wishes it was New York, but it's actually like the trashy low rent side of New York, which is New Jersey. So that always made more sense to me anyway. So I don't mind having New York in the main DC universe. I almost like the approach here where, like, the cops are talking about it, like, completely out of turn with what we think New York City is. Where you can raise a family in Manhattan.
I do love that. Of course, I always pictured trashy shit part of New York as, like, Jersey. I always pictured that as, like, Bloodhaven, but that's beside the point. I do...
No, Bloodhaven just is like a cardboard box around the corner.
The trash cans that are perpetually on fire outside of Gotham, that's Bloodhaven.
I do actually like that a lot. I like the idea that, like, if we're gonna have New York be in DC, let's sort of separate it from what we think of when we think of New York. So I do actually kind of like that a lot, this idea that Gotham and Metropolis are kind of the lightning rods that attract all the crazy shit and crime, and, like, New York looks fucking peaceful in comparison. I do actually think that's kind of a cool idea, so that way you can have New York in your universe, but kind of have it be almost a fictionalized New York that's way better than real New York because there's not as much crime because all the crime goes to fucking Gotham and Metropolis. I think that's kind of a neat idea.
I don't know, maybe it's because I'm a Midwesterner, but I've always pictured that New York is fine, but Gotham is more like Chicago, and Metropolis is more like Seattle.
Yeah,
That's the way I always picture it in my head. I don't know why.
yeah. I mean, I grew up in Ohio, like Midwestern as well. So I don't have much lived experience with these like huge mega cities. So I think that's totally fair as well.
The only thing that breaks my suspension of disbelief and stuff like this is because I'm not one of those people that's like, my fictional things can't have references to real life things. I think that's totally fine. Like, yeah, totally. Have the X-Men go to a movie theater and watch Return of the Jedi. That's fine by me. But if you exist in a fictional universe and you start name-dropping real people, like politicians, it feels kind of strange. So, like, New York is the exact opposite of New York, but somehow Giuliani is still relevant, and I just don't get that.
Yeah, like I'm trying to picture real life Giuliani like saying vigilantes draw criminals. Like that's amazing. That's so good.
I suppose there's every possibility that like this is actually Bizarro Giuliani, but I don't know.
I don't know. I guess I don't know why Giuliani wouldn't be president. Like, we live in a world without superheroes, Steve. So why in a world with superheroes where they generally avoid New York City would Giuliani still not become the mayor of New York?
I suppose
that's my logic for it.
If it's a safe city and he cannot campaign on being tough on crime, then how the hell does he get elected?
No. He is tough on crime because there's no like supervillains in New York because they're too afraid.
He's just like, you're welcome.
Jeez.
There you go. Flawless logic.
The other thing I appreciate about this era is just how ridiculous certain things can be. Like, I forgot, completely slipped my mind that during this era, she doesn't go by Donna Troy or Wonder Girl. She's fucking Troya.
Oh, God, all the time. Just, like, can we just leave Donna Troy alone for, like, 20 years? Can we just know Donna Troy stories? We're gonna forget about her for, like, 20 fucking years. I don't hate the character or anything, but, like, you know, it was interesting because I've never really read Donna Troy. She's more just like around in things, you know. So I was like trying to figure out like, okay, what's Donna Troy's deal? Let's go back to her first issue. And you know the funny thing about Donna Troy, she's a Wonder Woman character, pretty much in name only, because her first issue is Teen Titans #1. And it's so funny because, like, it shows, like, the Titans are gathering, and Wonder Girl from Themyscira joined it. I'm like, well, like, just try to put yourself in that headspace at that time. There's a fucking Wonder Girl? What?
I enjoy characters like Donna Troy that don't ever get, like, solo appearances and really only come to life as a character on a team. Bronze Tiger and Deadshot are this way, where you really understand them. You have to read Suicide Squad. Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver are like this, where you can't even read X-Men books to understand their deal. You have to read the fucking Avengers. And Donna's like that too, where you only understand Donna, and to a certain extent, Nightwing. You can really only get Nightwing if you read Teen Titans, because the solo stuff is there, but it's almost not relevant because everything important happens in another book.
It's just so fucking funny to me. I'm like, the fact that Donna Troy is not a Wonder Woman character. She's a Teen Titans character who's, like, you know, shoehorned into Wonder Woman lore, and that's why she's got so many fucking complicated origins. To the point where, like, fucking Hippolyta's just making up clay babies every other week, and it's weird. Kind of makes Wonder Woman a little less special when you just, oh, my daughter's bored and she wants a playmate. All right, let me just whip up another miracle baby. Hey, gods, you know how, like, I was all sad and lonely and like, I thought I had everything I wanted, but you were kind and graceful and you gave me the daughter I always needed. Yes, of course. Well, she's kind of bored and kids are hard. Can you give me, like, another? Just also maybe a black one, because that's Nubia's origin too. And it's fucking weird. I kind of hate both of their origins so much. Like, and at least Donna Troy has the grace to get 20 billion origins and muddy the waters.
It has the grace not to take up space in your Wonder Woman comic.
I mean, it would be better if she were there. I mean, Nubia's at least like that cool attempt at progressiveness that's like, you know, verges on insulting, but you know, I'll take it. It's white guy doing their best kind of moment. But like it's just the premise of how those characters are created that always bugs the crap out of me. Where I'm just like, that's, you know, it's one thing when Kara's like, oh yeah, my father, you know, your uncle sent me in a pod, but I got trapped in a wormhole. Yeah, like that's, it's still kind of like but it's better than just, oh yeah, I'm another baby from Krypton that got sent away. At least, you know, there's like the funness of the time difference and everything. You know, fucking what if a fucking Batman character showed up and was like, ah yes, Bruce Wayne, my parents or your parents were murdered in an alley, but they were my parents too.
Literally done that before.
Yeah, I was gonna say, didn't that happen?
I know, and it's terrible. And it's absolute garbage, and everyone agreed that it was absolute garbage. Even didn't Snyder even come out and say, "Yeah, I don't know what I was doing with that one."
Yeah, I think there is an interview there where he says that's probably his worst choice. No, but that's literally happened before. There's it's funny that you mentioned how Donna Troy is like so unimportant to Wonder Woman, but so important to Titans. And how much these other characters exist in that books, in team books, where they're just kind of cannon fodder. Because Tom King talks about this DC retreat he went to when he was pitching Heroes in Crisis. And they can only do Heroes in Crisis if they killed someone off, and DC says you have to kill off Wally West. And the fucking Titans editors and writers threw a shitstorm because they're like, anytime you guys want to kill someone, it's always a Team Titan. Like, yeah, where's the lie? Every single time the Titans get any momentum, someone dies. And half the time it's Donna Troy.
Oh, poor Donna.
This is the first, because I mean, isn't she in Earth 1 like as a background character?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny because she is, and like she even mentions that she has the clay origin that I hate. Yeah. Like it's so funny that, you know, Morrison just felt the need to shoehorn her in.
Because outside of that, this is the first thing I've ever seen with her. I mean, I guess outside of because I think Wonder Girl shows up in like the Young Justice cartoon show, and I've seen that.
Cassie. Wonder Girl shows up, but Donna does not.
So, like, I've never... Because all I know about Donna are the jokes around how convoluted her origin is. So, as I'm...
How'd this do for you?
So as I'm reading this, I'm like, I don't know who this Argent person is, but I'm glad she's here so I can be exposited to and learn about this this origin. And like, a page later, I'm just like, I'm going to go back and reread that page. Okay, wait, okay, hang on, okay. Wait, what? Like, I'm so fucking lost, but, so, like, okay, so, like, no, okay, I get it. Okay, so, Diana's made of clay. Okay, fucking great, makes sense. And then Donna is like, oh, there was this magic fucking mirror or something, and one day Diana was lonely, and I was made. Okay, great, that's awesome. And then she's like, and I'm like, okay, I get it. And then she's like, oh, but then an evil spirit shows up and he kidnapped me and I was born 1,000 times. And I'm just like, okay, what? So I was, this did very little to clear up who the fuck this is. And I don't really get a good sense of her character necessarily, besides just being kind of a younger Wonder Woman. But at the same time, it's only 2 issues. So it's not necessarily, and it's, you know, she has very few lines compared to Wonder Woman, so I don't really know that I get a good sense of who this character is or what their deal is, but you know, they they serviced the plot, but I did find their exposition origin story very confusing.
As someone that has read a lot of Teen Titans and follows most of their characters to those books, I've read it's like probably 200 something issues that have featured Donna Troy over my life, and I can tell you without a doubt this is the clearest her origin has ever been presented, and even I'm confused.
Oh my fucking god!
Oh my
Amazing.
god, that is so sad.
I sort of remember the stuff she's referencing, but then she says it in ways that don't line up with things I remember reading, so I have no fucking idea.
This is the clearest her origin has ever been presented. That's so funny. You know, it's funny because at the time, because this is when Titans were in New York, so this is when Green Lantern was around and stuff. Donna would have been dating Kyle in the comics at the time. That would have been concurrent with some of the stuff I just got past. I just got to where Kyle and Jade started dating. For those curious about Kyle Rayner's, fantastic love life. Hashtag Kyle Rayner should just be gay. Anyway, so this is when Kyle and Donna were dating too, and so I got a lot of information about Donna. She was a Dark Star for the majority of their time dating, and then she lost all her powers, and she was like kind of sad about it, but it's okay because it meant she got to spend more time with her son. Yeah, and then like their relationship ends when her son and ex-husband die in a car crash, and Donna decides, oh no, I just bring, bad luck to everyone who's around me, and so she breaks up with Kyle for that reason. I'm like, man, I just really don't like this character.
Is that before or after her future timeline son Lord of Chaos shit?
I wouldn't know because it's not in the stuff I've read with Kyle.
Fair enough. Because I feel like she's had, the way you described it, I feel like she's had at least 2 times her husband has died in a car accident or something like that. She has her old husband in the Teen Titans books because she's dating a dude that's like literally twice her age, and everyone's weirded out by it, but Mark Wolfman and George Perez are freaks like that for some reason. And then he dies, and then at some point later she has a kid or is pregnant, and then her husband and the kid die, and then the Green Lantern stuff you were reading. But then there's also like this weird middle point where her and the Titans travel to the future, and she's had a son who like takes over the planet, and he's like the Lord of Chaos or something.
I think my favorite Donna Troy origin is in the New 52, oddly enough. It's like the one good thing that came out of the David Finch run that kind of ended the New 52 Wonder Woman in a bit of a wet fart. But like because that was the one where you first got the Zeus father reveal, and you got like the reveal that the Amazons had like male children that they would either kill or just give to Hephaestus, and like Hephaestus took him in as a mercy and had him work his forge and stuff. And so Wonder Woman in that book liberated the male Amazons from what she saw as Hephaestus' slavery and gave them land on Themyscira. And the murder Amazons of the New 52 were like, no, we fucking hate this. No, stop it. This sucks. But Hippolyta was gone, so there was nothing they could really do about it. But then like a rogue group decided, no, we need a true Wonder Woman, one made without the influence of any man. And so then they make a Wonder Woman out of clay to lead them in a genocide against the male Amazons. And so that was the Donna Troy origin in that one. And like that part about it is really like very New 52, and that like a character's created to commit a genocide and stuff. But then it got really good because Wonder Woman works on redeeming her for the rest of the book. So I always like that shit.
I know she shows up in New 52 Titans Hunt, but I don't remember any of that stuff, so that's interesting.
Oh my god, that's so funny if they just like completely ignored the New 52 origin for her. Oh my god, that'd be like the tits.
I mean, I'm pretty sure they did, because she just shows up in the New 52 Titans hunt, and I have no idea what her deal is in that book at all.
How long into it? Would it be like the later years of the New 52 or like early on?
I don't remember when Titans Hunt came out. It was probably the second or third year of the New 52. Like, Titans was not like... There was a Teen Titans title when the book started that was written by Scott Lobdell, and it would go back and forth between Superboy and Teen Titans. But it wasn't during that. Titans Hunt, I think, happened like a year or so after, when they brought back the other Wally West. So I don't know where it fits in the scale, but I know Donna's in that, and it made no reference whatsoever to what you're talking about. So I'm not sure if they retconned it inside of its own retcon, but we'll see.
I think what it probably be is like one of those New 52 situations where they just like put a character in, assuming that they didn't get wiped out by the New 52ness.
Yeah.
You know. I bet you it's one of those.
That's probably fair. I love comic book continuity for that reason, because Chip Zdarsky, when he was on a podcast talking about Daredevil and how everyone forgot his secret identity with the new run, and he says at some point someone forgot that, and Elektra just happened to know Matt Murdock was Daredevil, and so instead of like explaining that or changing it or addressing it, he just rolls with it. He's like, "Look, I didn't break continuity. I'm following it." That guy broke the continuity.
Oh, that's so funny. Continuity is so fucking fun.
Anyway,
is there something else to talk about with this issue in and of itself, or are we just gonna fucking sit here and spitball about weird shit of comic books for a while?
We mentioned the fact that it's only 2 issues and it's a good sort of just like one and done story with no consequence whatsoever, which I like. Would you guys comfortably hand this out as an example of like, I want to get into Wonder Woman, here's a Wonder Woman story? Is this something that you would add to that list?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would as the like newcomer to Wonder Woman. I think if someone wanted to like read Wonder Woman, I'd be like, read the Hikatia, read this little 2-issue story. If you like that, maybe jump into, Earth One if you want to go like neck deep in this shit. So I mean, I enjoyed this. I thought it gave me like Wonder Woman here feels very consistent with Rucka's Wonder Woman in Hikatia. So it feels very much like the same character to me for the most part.
Yeah, and this would be like right around that same era.
So this seems to be an era that, Wonder Woman was at a reasonably decent place. So, I mean, I would say these are good stories to get into. Her. The only problem with that is it's like with anything. Like, I could hand you these stories, and you could be like, oh, man, I really like this character. Is that what's going on with this character now? And I'm like, well, no, but... Oh, really?
Actually, yes. No, because Snyder... Steve Orlando left his run in a really good place for Wonder Woman, where like they opened up the Themysciran embassy and everything, and Wonder Woman like found a new tribe of Amazons, and like they're sure that there's a 4th tribe somewhere out there in the world, and then Scott Snyder's like, oh no, Wonder Woman's dead. She's out in the afterlife dealing with gods and stuff now. Okay. It's not a terrible premise, but like they literally just gave her a status quo. Like they just gave her status quo back.
I didn't know Orlando was writing Wonder Woman.
Orlando and Wilson. It was weird because like G. Willow Wilson was the one given like the big push, and she got all the hype and stuff. And she really only did like 2 or 3 arcs that weren't like even fully completed. And then Orlando was stepping in, and like he did arcs before she was on the book, he did arcs in between her stuff, and then he kind of finished off the like you could read Rucka Rebirth till the end of Orlando's stuff, and like Wilson in there and stuff, and you can skip what's his face that did Starman, and apparently that's given him enough cred to keep writing comic books even though he's never written anything good since. Steve,
Robinson.
what's his name? Yeah, Robinson. You could completely skip his run because it's garbage, but like you can go Rucka, Wilson, Orlando, and like that's just the rebirth Wonder Woman more or less. And now, like it's not that what she's doing now is bad. Like I got kind of hype that the latest issue I've read, she's in Asgard. That's kind of cool, but I don't know. It's just kind of funny that they set up like a really good status quo for Wonder Woman, and then. Okay, bye.
Wait, is Willow Wilson still on the book? Is that who's writing it?
No, I don't know who's currently writing the book now. I know Wilson. Wilson just like it was weird. They gave a big push that she was going to be writing it, and then it's really nothing like consequential. She writes a couple arcs. Like that's it. Like 2 to 3 arcs. That was the whole thing.
Looks like the most recent issue was Michael Conrad and Becky Cloonan, and I don't know who those people are.
No idea who that is.
No.
Huh.
And now I know, like, we got Yara Flor. She was doing the future state stuff, and now she's going to be Wonder Girl, and so I don't know what's going on.
Well, what's her name? Joelle Jones is writing and drawing that, so that'll be interesting. But we'll see how long it lasts. Because if she's doing both, I can't imagine she's going to stick with it any longer than she did Catwoman.
How long did she do Catwoman for?
Not very long at all. I don't even think she made it a year.
It's a very pretty book, though.
Fair.
It was a gorgeous book. Part of the problem was it was a book launched out of a temporary status quo because it launched right out of the wedding, and we knew that Tom King had a plan, and like she wasn't going to stay away from Bruce Wayne, so there's like a very limited lifespan on that book from premise alone. But yeah, now Ram V's writing it, and I haven't kept up, but I hear it's very, very good.
Okay.
Anyway.
Joelle Jones, great art. Anyway, yeah, no, I would recommend this as like a solid Wonder Woman story. I don't know if it'd be like my thing for a new reader necessarily, because there's just like a whole lot going on in this, like not necessarily continuity heavy, but like I think you have to have a more of a passing familiarity with DC in this than I generally recommend like new reader stories to, because then they'd be like, oh, so what issue did they meet Batman? And I'm like, I don't fucking know. It's just how DC works. Everyone just knows each other until they don't. So like, there's kind of that. But like, just on the merits of the story itself, yeah, I think it's a solid story you just read. As like, if you're like, oh, I want a cool Wonder Woman story, what's like a good recommendation? I would have no problem recommending this. It doesn't do anything insulting certainly. It's not like the, I don't know if it has like the kind of kick that I would want. Like, I'm not sure you could read this and come away a Wonder Woman fan if you weren't already, I guess is the thing. Like, I don't know if there's any, like, this is just kind of a cool story featuring Wonder Woman as opposed to a Wonder Woman story that like helps you comprehend the character in a way that the Hikitia is not, you know, Hikatia, whatever it's called. Like that's a very short story too, but you can come away and you get a very clear understanding of the character from it. There's like some good sensation stories that do that too, stuff like that.
That's a good point because it kind of speaks to what I was saying earlier about Brian K. Vaughan, which is he's never done anything that I feel like has a strong personal stamp that really blows you away. Like he doesn't, to me at least, doesn't seem like he's got a take on Wonder Woman. He's just fill-in writer of the week who just happens to be very competent and just writes a good story, and Wonder Woman and Dawn and Troy happen to be the main characters of it. So yeah, for that it kind of suffers. But for me, I feel like this is the kind of story that I wish I could find more of when I'm trying to recommend comics to other people. Because trying to get people into comics usually leads to conversations about Watchmen and Dark Knight Returns and Batman Year One and all of that. And you can get away from some of those and try and give them things that are a little bit more like current, but still kind of prestigious. Like you can hand them something like Mr. Miracle now, or you can hand them like the current Swamp Thing book or something where like it's still in the vein of Watchmen, but it's not exactly Watchmen. and that's all fine and good, but I feel like the problem with that kind of stuff, and even like the Hecate Greg Rucka book, and even the Earth One books, is these are not books that tell you what the experience of reading comic books on a regular basis are actually like. If you're very lucky, once a year a writer will pull out something that's kind of like that. But on your day-to-day basis, if you want to pick up reading comics as a hobby, that is not representative whatsoever of what reading comics week to week is. So I like stuff like this because it gives you everything that it gives you everything that you would need to understand that experience, whether or not you understand it in the moment or not. Because you'll read this and be like, I kind of like this character. I wish I knew more about this. This part's really confusing. This part's really clear. This makes some sense. This doesn't. Like it's just a perfect microcosm of asking all of the right questions and leaving you with all of the right impressions, so that if you're enjoying the experience, you will now know what reading comics on a regular basis is like. And if you don't, then you know that comics are not for you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think I get what you're saying, but I think that creates kind of like a almost gatekeepy kind of thing of, like, I feel you can hand someone a more prestige, a more, like, great book and say, yeah, this is what it's like when it's at its best. And then you could hand them something like this and be like, and this is what it's like when it's just kind of there. And honestly, I like the stuff that's just kind of there. Maybe that is just me, but, like, I don't know, man. I went through the experience you're talking about of, I got into comics because I read, Dark Knight Returns and Watchmen, and then, like, Year One, Killing Joke. That's how I got into comics.
Yeah, same.
I got into comics reading all the big prestige things that were recommended, and then it made these kinds of stories feel a lot more special, a lot more cool, because it isn't some grand stamp. It's just like a perfectly competent story. And I really like that. I miss those often. Because it gets really annoying when someone's got a big hot take on a character and it's a bad take. And you're like, well, guess it's going to be like this for the next 5 years. Thanks, Scott Snyder.
Anytime.
I'd prefer it. Yeah, I'd prefer if it was just like, oh, here's 2-3 issues and then we're done. Next guy comes on. I don't know, maybe this is like a weird point, but like stories like this are great because there's no ego from the writer or whatever. There's just kind of an acceptance and a realization that the character is bigger than you, even if you're the one writing them. Like, I guess I have a hard time articulating that point beyond just like a mental image I get of someone, drawing the character or writing the character kind of hunched over a desk, and the character literally like standing behind them looking down on their work.
Yeah,
like as if they're critiquing. That's kind of the mental image I get, and it's the way I wish a lot more people wrote and approached these characters. Sometimes, not always. It's fine to break the mold and all, but like sometimes I feel like people just get way too big for their britches and come out with like the take that's going to take 10 years and be not worth it by the end.
Yeah, I mean, I get exactly what you mean, and that's why I really like this story, because it's like you said, it doesn't have the ego behind it. It's just Brian K. Vaughan doing a competent story. You would read this and you wouldn't even know it's a Brian K. Vaughan story, because there's nothing about it that feels outside of just telling a Wonder Woman story. And you're right, you can absolutely, and you guys are both proof positive of this, get into comics by reading the sort of big prestige stuff. I just mean that this is the kind of book where it sets your expectations on a certain level, where you get Dark Knight Returns, and it's not the same thing as, well, okay, now everything has some sort of like comparison point or context with Dark Knight Returns. You sort of have to get you read a bunch of those things, and eventually over time you kind of get into the comic scene on a regular basis. But I feel like you hand someone this, and it's just saying this is what your day-to-day is like. This is your bread and butter comic. This is what like 95% of what Marvel and DC on a regular basis, if they're not full of shit, are producing. It's stuff like this that's very much bound up in itself, that has some really cool, insightful things. Your favorite moments will be from stories like this, where the context will make no sense, but the specific moment will still feel like it endures and it's really good. Like the opening scene with Wonder Woman, like actively resisting the fight against Cheetah, is a solid standout in my mind Wonder Woman moment, but it's not one that's written for or bound up in some sort of prestige story, because that just doesn't happen as often. I don't think my favorite Batman moments are the ones that come from like Batman Year One. They're the ones that come from like Batman 217 or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
What's your favorite moment from Batman 217?
It's the point after Dick Grayson gets into the taxi to go to Hudson University, and he spends the whole issue just kind of like being really chill and calm about it, but then he gets in the taxi and he starts crying because he didn't want to face Bruce with tears in his eyes, because he knows he's going away to do a good thing, to go to university. But he was also just really sad to leave Bruce.
Is that like for real? That's from that issue?
It's Batman
Oh my god, I love you, Steve.
It's one of my favorite single issues of all time. It's the turning point where Dick leaves for college, and it's called One Bullet Too Many, or A Few Bullets Too Many, something like that.
I thought you just fucking pulled a number out of your ass. And...
It's a really good issue. Morrison uses it too, because it's the original story where Bruce Wayne locks up the Batcave because he's having this existential crisis where he's like, look, I can't fucking be in the Batcave. It reminds me of Dick Grayson too much. So let's go to the main city and let's live in this penthouse and let's create like this victim-centered program so I can help victims of crime during the day as Bruce Wayne and then beat up the criminals at night as Batman. And it sets up this long-running story arc where they first introduce Man-Bat, because Bruce becomes so like consumed by Batman all the time that he's forgetting how to be a person, which again Morrison borrows, and then Man-Bat becomes like his big bad at the end of the arc, because Man-Bat's like, literally, what if Batman was just Batman all the time?
God, I love it. I love it so much. You're the best, Steve.
But no, you see what
Matt,
I mean?
get on
though?
Steve's
That's
level.
what this issue does for me.
I do not
no,
have the
I
time
do.
nor the patience to get on Steve's level with the amount of Batman that he's read.
No, like I dig it. Like I feel bad because this is just 2 issues. Like it's hard to talk about. Like after I read this last night, I was like, "Hey Steve, do you want to like throw in just like another random issue from this run?" There's like a lot of, it was funny. Just the other night, or a week or 2 ago, I was looking through issues from this run, and I was like, let's look at this cover and look at this cover. Here's a cover where someone says "defund the police" on a t-shirt. Yes, I like that one. Here's one where it says "all cops are bastards." Here's one where it says "justice for George Floyd." Wait, what? When did this comic come out? No, it was interesting. So I was like, do you want to maybe throw another one on, because it's just such a short thing? But there's an interesting conversation we had around the book more than there is necessarily anything to say about the story itself. But like, God, if I were reading week to week and I got something like this, I'd be so hyped for it. You have no idea. Like, I'd probably complain a lot. Like, legitimately, I would sit there and be like, "What the fuck? Wonder Woman's not made of clay anymore." Like, I'd probably be that guy realistically, but like, just it would be so refreshing to read comics like this again, because we don't do it anymore.
And I mean that's the whole thing I was kind of going for here, picking this book, is like Earth One is, I think, legitimately the best Wonder Woman story of all time. Dead Earth is absolutely terrible. Hecatea, I was listening to that podcast. I was more on Matt's side. I legitimately really, really like that book, because I also really like Greek tragedies and stuff. But at the end of the day, my favorite comics tend to be the ones that are kind of like a time capsule for that period of time, that sort of helped me remember where I was when they first came out, what was happening around it, who the people involved were. Like my favorite issues of even the Tom King run are the ones that like really stand out for like, this is what 2017 was like, and even Morrison to a certain extent, where like, this is what 2007 was like. And so reading this like just small 2-issue chunk, it brought me back to 2000. It brought me back to reading those old back issues of Batman that even he did, in like this really pure, simple world where we didn't have to worry about the murder princess or comic book movies or bad internet takes, and I could just grab 2 issues of Wonder Woman, and the moral of the story is be kind to your sister, which I needed to learn because I was a dick to my sister. That's what I enjoy. I enjoy the fact that like this little book reminds me of like 6,000 or 7,000 other things that came out that year.
Fair enough. One thing I guess I want to talk about with it, because it kind of entered my head and I never got to bring it up. I like that Clayface is like, oh yeah, an actor always does his research. Maybe I should have looked up what Cheetah's actual name was, but I did a pretty good job.
How do you, like, what are you using to research Cheetah that does not just immediately tell you what her name is?
Insert Ben Kingsley gif where he talks about what an actor does really when they say they're doing their research, which is they Google their name and have a wank.
Oh my god.
I also like how like Clayface's whole like thing is, okay, now I've got Wonder Woman's powers. Now what am I gonna do? I'm gonna still like I just stopped somebody else's robbery and then just took the money for myself.
It's just such a fucking Silver Age thing to do. I love it.
Well, it's just more that, like, you know, he literally gets the powers of a god kind of thing. Like, you know, literally Clayface becomes Zeus for a half second there. And I just think, like, it's just so small scale, which is just, like, the perfect thing for that. Like, I love when the fucking, like, mook villains get, like, just the power that they don't even know what to do with. Because, like, Lex Luthor would have killed for a moment like that in his life, right? But fucking Clayface is just like, so rob banks but better? Question mark.
I immediately love that there's, again, and I keep harping on this, the simplicity of it, but there's no exposition. There's no, like, I've secretly had this like, massive problem with Wonder Woman on a theoretical level my entire life. There's no explaining motivation. He's literally just, I am dirt. You're dirt. Clearly this means something.
Also, like, is that like public knowledge to people? Because he's just like I said, I've done my research. No, I'm not going to explain any further. I just know from Google that you are made of clay. Like, that's just, did she, like, sit down with Lois in a fucking interview like Superman and be like, oh, well, I was made, like, what, is that information just, like, available to people?
I have this image in my head.
So, in all fairness, I think so.
I have this image in my head of, like, Diana at the UN as an ambassador. And she's one of those people that always tells the same story every time. So every time she goes up to give, like, a speech on any given topic, like fucking hungry kids in Africa, she'll open with, like, I was sculpted out of clay and given life by the gods. And then somewhere 20 minutes later, rope it back to the issue.
Here she goes with the fucking clay story. And you got time to go to the bathroom. This part lasts like 15 minutes. Then she'll get to the actual...
Exactly.
Oh, man. Yeah. I don't know. I like this book. It was fun. It was a fun one. I guess if you really like this, you should probably read Bombshell's American Soil story arc, because it takes the same premise but then actually puts all the thought and stuff into it. So there. But yeah, I liked it. All right, do we want to talk about this in any other regard, or do we want to just move on and talk about move on to the rating?
Oh, we can move on to the rating.
Yep.
All right, Steve, why don't you go first?
I'm trying to decide how much the art like really weighs into this. I'm gonna give it.
The fact that you remembered a 2-issue story 20 years later I'm gonna say the art doesn't weigh into it all that much.
That's fair. I'm gonna give it 4.5 out of 5 nonsensical explanations of Clay's density.
Yeah, I'm right there with Steve. I'm gonna give it 4.5. 4.5 out of 5. Brendas, Cheetah Brendas.
Brenda. It's the most white bitch name too.
Like Barbara isn't though.
I mean, yeah, but like at least that's her actual
That's
name.
fair.
As far as just a made-up name, she could have called her like Kathleen or something,
True.
you know. Anyway, man, Kathleen would be a much better name for Cheetah because it sounds kind of catty. Okay. Anyway. I'll give this 4.5 out of 5 extensive researches that did not involve looking up the character's name. What is he, right for CBR? Did either of you see the fucking CBR article when the Mortal Kombat trailer dropped, where someone was complaining about fucking Chun-Li not being in the movie?
Yes.
And then they like had to post the update and be like, "Oh, turns out Chun-Li's from Street Fighter."
So good.
Comic book journalism is trash.
Oh man. Anyway, all right. I think that'll do it for us. Well, we need a discussion topic for next week, because next week we'll be out of the month of wonder. We'll be into May.
I think Alfie's technically next, isn't he?
Yeah, I guess so. So we'll just message Alfie and figure out what he wants us to discuss.
Sounds good to me.
Yep.
Yep. All right. Everyone, thanks very much for watching. Until next time, I'm the philosopher.
I am the Wonder Woman erotica lover.
And I am the exile of Paradise Island.
Ooh.
Oh, that's pretty good. And we are your geeky gentlemen, and we will be discussing.
Dun 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 dun.